My name is Eliza Hart. That Christmas Eve in the grand ballroom of the Palmer House Hotel, my mother-in-law raised her glass of wine and smiled as she announced, "This is Graham's future wife." She was talking about Natalie, the 21-year-old intern. In that instant I felt like I vanished from my own life. Colleagues, business partners, everyone looked at me as if I were a ghost, while my husband stepped forward to embrace her under the glittering lights. But what they didn't know was that Natalie wasn't simply a rival. That lavish room would soon turn into the stage for an unmasking no one expected. Have you ever been turned into an outsider in your own family or at your own job? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to read it. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you can follow me through this journey. To explain why that Christmas Eve became a turning point, I need to go back a few years when everything still seemed under control. 3 years earlier, the company where Graham and I both worked was on the brink of crisis. A major supply chain failure left hospitals without timely medical equipment, phones rang non-stop, and the board was in chaos. As operations manager, I practically lived at the office for weeks. My team scrambled to secure alternate suppliers, renegotiate shipping contracts, and overhaul inventory controls to cut losses as fast as possible. I still remember nights spent at the port with truck drivers, waiting for the last shipment to clear customs. When the situation finally began to stabilize, Graham, then the deputy director of sales, suddenly became the company's hero. The strategies my team and I built, he carried into the boardroom and presented with confidence, as if all of it stemmed from his own insight. I never denied that Graham had charisma and a gift for speaking. But I knew who had sweated through every detail, who had stayed awake night after night. At the time, I didn't dwell on it. I thought simply, we're married, his success is our success. But then things began to shift, not in the office but at home. Marjorie, my mother-in-law, never hid her coldness toward me. In her eyes, I was a woman too focused on career, too quiet about children, and therefore unfit to be a mother. At family dinners, she made her point subtly but unmistakably. "A wife should know where her priorities lie," she once said, eyes fixed on Graham as if I were no more than a shadow at the table. I kept trying to maintain peace, hoping time would show her my commitment. Instead, she openly began excluding me. Birthday parties, holiday trips. My name simply disappeared from the invitations. Graham covered for her with excuses about work commitments. But I knew it was Marjorie's choice, and he never once objected. Cracks began to spread. Graham, once a man of routines, now had erratic schedules. Late meetings, sudden urgent projects, unexpected business trips. His phone always lay face down, an invisible barrier between us. At night, I sometimes caught the glow of his screen across his face, but he'd shut it off the moment I stirred. What chilled me most was the scent. Graham had always worn a subtle cologne I'd given him on our anniversary. Recently, though, he came home carrying a sharp, unfamiliar fragrance. He brushed it off as trying something new, but the way he rushed straight into the shower told another story, like he was scrubbing away traces before I could notice. I began studying the bank statements. Their new charges appeared: Bella Vista, Garden Terrace, Moonlight Bistro, all upscale restaurants known for candlelit tables and fine wine. When I asked, Graham said it was client entertainment. But the timelines didn't match. He claimed a budget meeting ended at 5 p.m., yet the receipt showed an intimate dinner for 2 at 8:30. It wasn't restaurants. Statements revealed hotel bookings near Midway Airport, coinciding with his so-called conferences. I called the hotel about one event, only to be told no such conference had taken place. The bill listed spa treatments for 2 and champagne delivered to the room. I felt like I was standing outside a locked door, secrets piling up on the other side. Some nights I sat waiting for him, torn between self-doubt and the evidence staring back at me. One afternoon, preparing the car for service, I found a small jewelry box hidden in the trunk. My heart clenched. My first instinct was hope. Maybe an anniversary surprise, maybe an apology. Hands trembling, I opened it. Inside wasn't a ring, but a gleaming bank vault key resting on black velvet. I nearly dropped it. No card, no note, just that key, silent, ominous. It felt like a doorway to something far bigger than dinner receipts or hotel invoices. My ears rang with one question: what was Graham hiding in there? Then came that September morning when Natalie Pierce walked through the glass doors of our office. For a 21-year-old intern, she carried herself with startling poise. A tailored navy pencil skirt, Crisp white blouse, sharp heels clicking against marble floors. Hair pinned neatly with a few strands loose for effect, polished but deliberate. I saw the looks exchanged around me, men glancing up from their screens, women eyeing her with wary curiosity. You could overlook an ordinary intern, but not someone who arrived with that kind of confidence and calculation. Within a week, IT sent an internal notice about new access privileges for Natalie. My eyes froze on the list. She'd been granted clearance to high-level financial records, something even mid-managers like me had waited years to reach. I called IT immediately. How does an intern get access to financial reports? I demanded. The technician hesitated. Deputy Director Hart approved it, ma'am. We're just following instructions. Deputy Director Hart. My husband. My breath left me in a slow rush. He had opened that door for her himself. At the next Monday meeting, Natalie stunned the room. Instead of quietly taking notes, she sat upright, opened her laptop and asked in a firm voice, "The hospital support expense last quarter, nearly $50,000. Who authorized it? And what's the specific cost verification process?" The room went still. That was no question for an intern. Even seasoned managers avoided that line of inquiry. It tied directly to a fund overseen by Marjorie herself. Every eye turned to Graham. He didn't falter, he smiled, almost proud. "This is exactly why I want Natalie involved in projects. She's sharp. She asks what others won't." A few snickers rippled around the table, but I sat frozen. The ease with which Graham defended her, encouraged her, unsettled me deeply. In the days that followed, patterns became clearer. Each morning Graham arrived with 2 Starbucks cups, a plain black coffee for himself, a vanilla latte for Natalie. He placed it on her desk with such practiced ease that colleagues assumed they'd known each other for years. From the hallway I watched it repeat day after day. Some younger employees whispered, "Has anyone else ever had the deputy director bring them coffee?" Another replied, "Never. But Natalie is different." Not stopping at coffee, Graham even brought Natalie into sales meetings, a field unrelated to the strategy she was supposedly interning for. I remember one time, during a meeting with a major client, Natalie sat right beside Graham, taking notes like a senior assistant. When I asked, "What reason does an intern have to be present at such an important negotiation?" Graham calmly replied, "Eliza, you should be more open. Young people bring fresh perspectives. Natalie has qualities our team needs." I gripped my pen, holding back from answering in front of the client. But inside I knew, Graham was crossing lines that should not be ignored. Natalie's questions increasingly revealed their true nature. She wasn't curious like a learner, she was auditing the books. Once, in an internal budget meeting, she stared straight at the projector screen and said, "The donation expenses have multiple overlapping items. For example, support for St. Mary's Hospital. Maybe I'm mistaken, but the report shows part of it also listed under operating expenses. Why is that?" I looked up, catching Graham's face harden before it shifted into a strained smile. He dodged, praising Natalie's keen eye, but never giving a real answer. Around the room, a few colleagues shook their heads in frustration. No one dared probe further, but everyone sensed something was off. I began keeping my own notes. Every expense Natalie pointed out, I wrote down to compare with the data I could access. Some entries were vague, duplicated, or rushed through approval. And in most cases, the final signature was Graham's. One evening as I left the office, my phone buzzed. A message from Lena, the head of accounting, one of the few colleagues I still trusted. "Eliza, you need to see this." Attached was a screenshot from the system. Natalie accessing detailed reports of the charity fund, the hospital support section, officially signed off by Graham Hart. The late autumn wind cut through me, but what made me shiver was the feeling that the truth was starting to surface. That night, I sat in the living room with a cup of cold tea, watching streetlights spill through the window. The image of Natalie bent over her laptop, eyes glinting as she dissected numbers, replayed in my mind. An ordinary intern would never be given such tasks. An ordinary intern would never ask questions digging into the company's financial core. And an ordinary intern certainly wouldn't have Graham's signature shielding her. I sank back into the chair, heart pounding. One question echoed, pounding like a relentless knock at the door. Who exactly was Natalie Pierce? And why was Graham risking everything to push her deeper into the company's center of power? Marjorie, my mother-in-law, had a near-obsessive passion for orchids. She dedicated an entire greenhouse in her backyard to hundreds of orchids of every variety and color. It was her private domain where few were allowed without her approval. Yet not long after joining the company, Natalie found her way straight into Marjorie's heart through that very passion. At a family dinner, while I was still arranging plates, she leaned in across the table, voice sweet. "Mrs. Marjorie, I read an article about orchid care techniques, but I've never had the chance to try them. I heard you have a beautiful collection. Would you share some tips with me?" Marjorie's eyes lit up. She set her utensils down at once and turned to Graham. "Did you hear that? Finally, a young person who listens when I talk about orchids. This Saturday, Natalie, come over. I'll show you the greenhouse." I forced a smile. In all my years as her daughter-in-law, I had never once been invited inside. From then on, Natalie entered and left Marjorie's home like family. On weekends, instead of shopping or cleaning with me, Graham took Natalie to the greenhouse. Once, arriving late for dinner, I found her standing beside Marjorie, the two of them bent over orchids, laughing like grandmother and granddaughter. "Orchids need diffused light, nothing too harsh. See here. This is how I control the temperature in the greenhouse," Marjorie explained, her aging hand resting warmly on Natalie's shoulder. I lingered in the doorway, invisible in a place that should have been mine. I decided to try a subtle counterattack. One day I gave Marjorie a leather-bound notebook saying, "I know you like to write down your orchid care methods. This paper is thick, the ink won't bleed. I hope you'll enjoy it." Marjorie looked surprised, then accepted it. As she opened the notebook, a few papers tucked inside slipped out. I bent quickly to pick them up and my chest tightened. They were printed invoices from the accounting system marked "Medical Equipment Donation, paid by Marjorie Hart Foundation. Authorized by Marjorie herself." But the recipient company was unfamiliar. Med Supply Partners LC. I had combed through data before, but never seen that supplier on any official contracts. Sounded like a shell. I said nothing, folding the paper and slipping it into my pocket. Marjorie remained unaware. That night I dug further. In the payment list, Med Supply Partners appeared multiple times, totaling over $100,000, all under hospital support. Uneasy, I contacted Aidan Collins, an old college friend, now a forensic financial investigator specializing in tracing money in commercial lawsuits. I sent him a copy of the invoice along with some data I had quietly saved. A few days later, Aidan called back, his voice heavier than I'd ever heard. "Eliza, are you sure you want the truth? I checked Med Supply Partners. It's not a real supplier. It's an empty LLC, no operations, no employees. What's more, the registered address is a P.O. box on the west side of Chicago. And that P.O. box matches the address of Graham Hart's safety deposit box. I confirmed it through the banking system. No mistake." In the dark kitchen, I clutched the table edge. The scattered pieces, the key in the car, the hotel bills, now the shell company, were forming a picture. Aidan paused, then spoke slowly, each word like a knife. "Eliza, if this lines up, it's not infidelity. It's embezzlement of medical charity funds. And the fallout won't be small." In my head, a sharp sound rang, the clinking champagne glasses from that Christmas party. Only this time it wasn't family shame. It could be a scandal large enough to bury not just Graham but the entire Hart name. And I knew I could no longer stand aside. That evening, after a late shift, I walked to the company parking lot. Chicago's late autumn air was biting, wind scattering papers around my shoes. I unlocked my car, set my bag on the passenger seat when I heard footsteps, steady, deliberate, on the concrete. A middle-aged man approached, his face familiar, though I couldn't place him. He stopped right in front of my car and said slowly, "Thank you for keeping her safe." "Excuse me, what did you say?" He looked directly into my eyes, stern but weary. "Natalie. He's my daughter. I know you've been watching her these past weeks. Trust me, she's not who Graham thinks." His name clicked in my memory. Evan Pierce, an independent security consultant who had appeared at internal workshops. "Chuck," I asked. "Your daughter? That intern?" He nodded, lowering his voice. "She once interned at the FBI. This time she entered the company undercover to track the missing funds from Mrs. Marjorie's charity and the contracts Graham signed. She isn't a mistress, Eliza. She's working. Each word hit like a stone sinking into me. I tried to piece it together. The audit-like questions, Natalie's sharp eyes, her unusual confidence. It hadn't been seduction at all. But why keep it secret? Why let me believe? My voice faltered. Evan sighed. Because every undercover investigation needs isolation. The fewer who know, the higher the chance of success. My daughter is gathering evidence to prove the chain. Charity fund, shell company, personal spending. We need it all before we present to Federal Judge Ruth Callahan. Nothing partial. If we act too soon, Graham and Marjorie will erase everything. I gripped the steering wheel, fury and shock colliding inside me. All this time I'd lived in torment, believing my husband was unfaithful when the truth was far worse. Embezzlement of medical charity funds, and Natalie was the key to exposing it. Evan stepped closer, voice firm. Eliza, you must be patient. She knows what she's doing. But I warn you, if Graham suspects, everything collapses. That night I drove home in a storm of emotions. Graham sat in the living room, laptop open, the screen's glow on his face. When I walked in, he looked up with a strained smile. You're late. Long meeting. I muttered something, taking off my coat, hiding my racing pulse. In my head, Evan's words replayed endlessly. It's not a mistress. She's working. A few days later, an unexpected chance arrived. I was arranging documents in the conference room when Natalie walked in holding a thick file. Her eyes flashed for a second when she saw me there, but she didn't avoid me. Instead, she set the file on the table and said softly, "We need to talk." I held my breath and gestured for her to close the door. In the quiet room, Natalie lowered her voice. You already know, don't you? I didn't beat around the bush. Your father came to me. He said you aren't what I thought. A flicker of relief crossed her face. That makes it easier. I don't have to pretend with you anymore. She sat across from me, her gaze turning icy. Nothing like the naive intern everyone at the office thought she was. I'm working with a federal investigative team. We need enough evidence for Judge Ruth Callahan. Every transaction from the charity fund to the shell company and then into personal spending. If we don't connect every link, this case goes nowhere. Why drag me into this? Natalie tilted her head, voice calm. Because you have things I don't. Access, a certain level of trust from Graham, and above all, personal motivation. No one sees more clearly than a wife who's been betrayed. My throat tightened, but I didn't object. She took a small silver USB drive from her bag and placed it in my hand. It was ice cold. This holds the data I've gathered. But only open it when you're truly ready. When you accept that once you open it, you'll lose everything. Your marriage, your family, the illusion of peace. But you'll also get yourself back. I gripped the USB, torn in 100 directions. The truth sat in my palm, small, yet as heavy as a weight. Natalie stood, adjusted her coat, and left me with one last line. You'll know when it's time. And when it is, don't hesitate. I lingered in the cold conference room, the fluorescents buzzing overhead, fluorescent light washing over the wooden table, my fingers still tracing the USB's surface. In my mind, Evan's and Natalie's voices struck like two low notes in sync. Thank you for keeping her safe. Only open it when you're ready to lose everything, to take yourself back. A truth had surfaced, but it promised many more layers yet to be peeled back. And I knew the decisive moment was closer than ever. From the moment Natalie pressed that ice-cold USB into my hand, I knew I'd reached a crossroads with no way back. Every lie, every hidden trail, everything was within my reach. All it took was a choice. That night, I sat in my home office, my laptop screen reflecting my tense face. Graham was working late at the office as usual. I connected the landline to a mini recorder, the one I used to record client interviews. When the screen showed an incoming call from Graham, I drew a deep breath and hit record. His voice dropped, trying to sound calm but betraying command. Listen, this. Mary's hospital expense from last week. Reclassify it as operating costs. Don't let it appear under donations. I'll resign. Each word was a nail hammered into his own coffin. A few days later, I went to Graham's safety deposit box. The small key I'd once found hidden in the jewelry box in the car trunk was now in my coat pocket. I waited until he left on a business trip, then drove to a suburban branch. The staff had no reason to doubt me when I presented co-owner documents. Inside the box, beside some insurance packets, I found Graham's old phone. My hands shook as I plugged in a cable and copied everything to the external drive I'd brought. Texts, emails, call logs, a vault of secrets he'd tried to bury. Only when the screen showed the full list of files did I finally exhale. Not long after, Aiden sent me a string of images through a secure email. He added a brief note: "Eliza, brace yourself." I opened them one by one. Traffic cameras showed two men loading boxes labeled medical donation equipment. But the vehicle wasn't a hospital truck. It was a black SUV registered to Graham Hart. I went weak, but before I recovered, Aiden called. "Remember the medical conference Lewis Graham said he had to attend last month?" I cross-checked the credit card receipts. On that same day, there's a full spa package in Wisconsin. Booked for 2. His signature. I collapsed into a chair, my head spinning. Infidelity was humiliation enough. But skimming medical charity funds to bankroll that life. There were no words. I knew I couldn't face this alone. I met with attorney Sophia Ramirez, an old acquaintance of my aunt's who specializes in complex divorces. In her bright office, I laid out the files, the recording, and the backup drive. Sophia flipped through each document, nodding. "Eliza, you're sitting on a gold mine of evidence. We can file for divorce on the grounds of marital waste, using marital assets for an affair and illegal purposes. That protects your assets to the fullest, and Graham will have to reimburse everything." I clenched my hands. "My biggest fear is being dragged into liability." She smiled reassuringly. "With what you've brought, the court will see you weren't complicit. You documented, preserved, and sought counsel. That proves you're separate from his conduct." At the same time, Aiden drew up a money flow chart. On a whiteboard, he connected each arrow. Marjorie's charity fund, MedSupply Partners LC, Graham's subaccount, personal spending. I stared at the diagram, red lines tangled like a web, each arrow another slice through my trust. "This isn't suspicion anymore," Aiden said. "It's a system. And when we give it to Judge Callahan, you'll have more than enough to free yourself." I began living 2 lives. By day, I kept my composure, sat through meetings, forced a smile when I saw Natalie and Graham confer. By night, I combed through files and data line by line, printed them and locked them away in my private drawer. Every step was a dangerous game, but I knew there was no turning back. One Friday morning, as I cleared my inbox, I saw an email from Marjorie. The subject line stood out: "Invitation to special announcement, Winter Gala." I opened it, my heart thudding. "Dear Eliza, our family is honored to invite you to the Winter Gala at the end of the month. It will be a formal occasion to announce something special that you'll certainly want to witness in person." Below was Marjorie Hart's meticulous signature. I remained motionless before the screen, eyes locked on the words. A special announcement. It sounded like a verdict already written, and I knew this could be the night when every secret would be dragged into the light. The Winter Gala was held at the Palmer House Hotel, where crystal chandeliers cast shimmering light across mirrored walls. Violin and piano blended into the kind of lavish atmosphere Marjorie loved to flaunt. I walked in wearing a simple black dress, clutching a small bag holding the external drive, the recording, and the silver USB Natalie had given me. Inside, familiar faces from banking and real estate turned to look. A few whispered. I felt their stares weighing on me as if they'd been prepped for what was about to happen. When the clock struck 8 o'clock, the lights dimmed. Marjorie stepped onto the stage in a blazing red gown, a champagne flute in hand. She gave a signal, and the spotlight flared on the head table, Graham seated with Natalie at his side. "Ladies and gentlemen," her voice rang through the hall, "tonight is not only to celebrate our company's success, but to welcome the future. My son, Graham Hart, has found a wonderful partner, young, talented, and full of ambition. I am honored to introduce Natalie Pierce." A swell of murmurs broke out. Some guests stood, raising their glasses. Graham forced a smile but still slipped an arm lightly around Natalie's shoulder. She bowed her head, her face uncannily composed. I sat at a table behind them, humiliation and cold fury rising in me. This was the moment they intended to erase me in public. I drew a deep breath, stood and walked toward the stage. Gasps rippled through the hall. Many eyes widened. I held up a hand for the microphone. "Excuse me, but before everyone toasts, I have a few things to say." My voice rang clear through the speakers and the room fell silent at once. Marjorie frowned, Graham turned pale, and Natalie lifted her gaze to me, her eyes quietly encouraging. I am Eliza Hart, Graham's lawful wife. And the person you were just introduced to is not a mistress, as it appears. She is Natalie Pierce, former FBI intern, daughter of Mr. Evan Pierce. She entered this company to investigate the flow of money from the Hart Foundation charity fund. A ripple of murmurs spread across the hall. I continued, steady and firm. That money follows a familiar route, from the charity fund, through the shell company MedSupply Partners, and straight into Graham Hart's personal spending, hotels, spas, jewelry, and even items disguised as donated medical equipment. Graham shot to his feet. That's a lie. Eliza. But the noise at the back of the hall drowned him out. Two men in dark suits walked in, agency badges glinting from their pockets. Between them was a tall, silver-haired woman with a stern gaze, Federal Judge Ruth Callahan. The hall seemed to hold its breath. Evan Pierce followed, walking slowly toward the stage. He turned to me with a slight nod. Thank you, Eliza. We'll take it from here. Judge Callahan raised a folder. The federal court has received a motion to preserve evidence. From this moment, all documents and assets related to the Hart Foundation Charity Fund are under control. Whispers swelled like a storm. Marjorie went rigid, her grip on the champagne flute so tight it cracked. Graham staggered back, his face bloodless. Natalie rose. From her bag she took the silver USB and plugged it into the laptop connected to the large screen behind the stage. A blue light flashed and a spreadsheet appeared. Every invoice, every date, every charity trip, aligned with photos of Graham's SUV, spa receipts, and restaurant bills. Then the final image came up. A photo of a bank safety deposit box, next to a small silver key. Natalie faced the audience, her voice calm but sharp as a blade. And here, ladies and gentlemen, is the final piece of evidence. That box opens only with Graham Hart's personal key. Right after Natalie's USB finished the presentation, the room shattered into 100 fragments of silence. No one dared clink a glass. The chandeliers still sparkled, but the air had thickened, heavy as if the oxygen had been drained. The chairman of the board, Mr. Whitaker, with the company for more than 3 decades, sprang to his feet. His voice was hoarse but resolute as it filled the hall. Effective immediately, Graham Hart is suspended from all executive duties pending official findings. Internal audit will coordinate with federal investigators to conduct an urgent review of the entire Hart Foundation. The entire board nodded in unison. No one objected. Graham stammered, "No, you don't understand. This is a misunderstanding, it's..." But his words were drowned by a curt order from an agent. Lock all of his system access. Now. An IT staffer hurried off, laptop in hand. I saw Graham's hands tremble, like a man whose long-worn mask had just been stripped away. In less than 24 hours, a barrage of calls came crashing in. Partners from New York, Houston, even London demanded independent audits before continuing any contracts. Reporters started asking questions. Media parked outside the company building. Those who once toasted Graham at parties now fell silent, or worse, sent emails cutting ties. Social media lit up with commentary. Photos of Graham and Natalie under the spotlight spread with captions. Where did the hospital charity funds go? I wasn't surprised. That's how it goes. People cling to power and they turn away just as quickly when it collapses. One afternoon, stepping out of a meeting with Sophia, I saw Marjorie waiting in the hallway. She wore a gray coat. The hair she used to keep immaculate was now in disarray. Dark circles showed under her eyes. "Eliza," she rasped, "I want a word. Just a few minutes." I studied her for a long moment, then nodded. We settled into a quiet corner, away from curious eyes. Marjorie's hands shook as she grabbed mine, squeezing so hard my knuckles whitened. "Maybe I was wrong to treat you the way I did. I just thought Graham deserved a different image. I never imagined it would come to this." Her voice broke, eyes glistening. "Can you forgive me?" I took a deep breath and gently withdrew my hand. "I wish you good health, Marjorie. But as for the truth, let the court decide." Her face crumpled, but I didn't look back. I was done being a woman who needed permission to exist in the Hart family. That night, as I returned to my apartment, my phone buzzed nonstop. A message from Graham: "Come home now. We can still fix this." My fingers trembled for a second, but before I could reply, the screen lit again. Sophia, my attorney, already had the phone. Calmly, she typed a few words and sent them. "All communications must go through counsel." I stared at the screen, a cold, freeing feeling rising in my chest. The final door had shut. No more empty promises or doomed rescue plans. In the dark room, I leaned back and listened to the wind hiss past the window. The dominoes had fallen. The federal courthouse in Chicago was packed that morning. Spring light filtered through tall windows, glinting off the wooden benches where reporters, company staff, and even a few former neighbors squeezed in. The silence was taut, as if every breath carried the weight of justice about to be spoken. The civil hearing was called first. Attorney Sophia stood beside me, a thick stack of files laid out before Judge Callahan. She nodded after reviewing the evidence. The recording of Graham directing accounting to reclassify, the expense, the spa bill matching the conference date, Aiden's money flow diagram. "Mrs. Hart," the judge said clearly, "the court recognizes the grounds of marital waste. Marital assets were spent on infidelity and illegal purposes by Mr. Graham Hart. Therefore, you will retain the marital home, your retirement accounts, and be excused from liability for debts arising from his unlawful conduct." Graham sat one row away, eyes bloodshot, hair disheveled as if he hadn't slept in a week. He leapt up, voice ragged. "Your Honor, I can explain." The judge raised a hand, cutting him off. "Mr. Hart, this is not the place for emotional pleas. Your attorney may speak in due course." I stayed motionless, hands clasped, feeling as though the last door had finally closed. Next came the criminal file. The prosecutor summarized crisply: more than $200,000 embezzled through the charity fund, payments to MedSupply partners, evidence of personal spending. Marjorie was named as well for negligent management of the fund. A federal agent took the stand and read from the detailed report. The boxes of medical equipment meant for St. Mary's Hospital were redirected into Graham Hart's private vehicle. Shipping slips and invoices align. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. I heard a former colleague mutter, "Didn't think it would be this blatant." Judge Callahan's voice was firm. "Mr. Graham Hart faces restitution of the full amount, along with probation or incarceration depending on repayment and cooperation. Mrs. Marjorie Hart is liable for poor governance, must resign from the foundation's chair, and is barred from running a nonprofit for 10 years. Hart Group will implement new financial controls with regular external audits." Graham sagged into his seat, head in his hands. Marjorie shut her eyes, lashes trembling. A human moment. I thought everything had been said, but as the judge prepared to record the judgment, I stood. "Your Honor," my voice carried, calm but full, "I have a request." Everyone turned. Sophia squeezed my hand, asking if I was sure. I nodded. "I don't want all restitution to return solely to the Hart Foundation, a group the Hart family once manipulated. I ask the court to allow part of the funds to be used for a scholarship for pediatric nursing, named after my mother, Margaret Doyle. She was a nurse for 30 years. She taught me that caring for life is the highest work." A hush fell. I saw reporters start scribbling at once. A few nursing students in the back row blinked back tears. Judge Callahan studied me for a long moment, then nodded slightly. "This proposal will be given serious consideration. Justice is not only punishment, it is also the chance to restore value." When the readings were finished, the judge set her glasses down and looked straight at me. "Mrs. Eliza Hart, before the court issues its final ruling, do you have anything else to say?" I drew a deep breath, letting the sleepless nights, the doubts, and the quiet wounds gather into a single current. "I'm not choosing victory," I said slowly. "I'm choosing the truth." And I knew that whatever sentence followed, this moment had already freed my life. After Judge Callahan's gavel closed the case, everything dropped like a heavy curtain. Graham left the courtroom in a rumpled suit, no trace of the lauded executive he once was. Prison time, restitution, and the court of public opinion hung over him, an inescapable end. Marjorie, gaunt-faced, filed to step down from the foundation board a week later. The media reported it, but few cared for her explanations. Those who once bowed to the heart's power now quietly moved on. For me, the new path opened without applause, only quiet steps. After months of working together, Evan Pierce sent me an email. There's a compliance director role at the St. Clair Hospital System. I think you should consider it. But the decision will be made by an impartial hiring panel. I can only refer you, the rest is up to your merit. I applied and went through 3 rounds of interviews. When the official offer arrived, I sat before the screen for a long time that I was done being known as Graham Hart's wife, or the woman dismissed by her in-laws. I was entering nonprofit healthcare, helping protect what others had tried to turn into a tool for greed. On my first day, I walked the halls of St. Clair, where white light reflected off photos of pediatric care lining the walls. A young nurse smiled at me. Welcome to the team. 3 months later, the scholarship in my mother's name, the Margaret Doyle Pediatric Nursing Scholarship, was awarded for the first time. I kept the ceremony small and warm in the hospital auditorium. Natalie came in a simple white blouse, sitting beside Evan. Judge Callahan attended as well, her stern face softening as young nursing students stepped up to receive their certificates. When I spoke, my voice caught but stayed strong. My mother was a nurse for more than 30 years. She taught me that strength isn't always in power or money, but in how we care for life. This scholarship is to carry that legacy forward. Silence, then applause. I looked to the front row and saw Noah, my godson, sneaking me a scribbled drawing. It showed a woman in a long robe with a simple halo. Underneath, in clumsy letters, Aunt Eliza wears a good cape. I pressed the paper to my chest, eyes stinging. One winter morning, snow fell in a light dust across the sidewalks like white salt. I drove along Lake Michigan. The lake stretched wide, half-frozen, reflecting a pale blue sky. I turned off the GPS and lowered the window. Cold air rushed in, carrying the scent of water and the metallic bite of a Chicago winter. I inhaled deeply and shut my eyes for a moment. Everything that had happened, the betrayal, the shame, the sleepless nights, played like a slow reel, then dissolved into the icy breath. I wasn't chasing anyone's approval anymore. I was living my own truth. The car rolled on, leaving faint tracks in the thin snow. The road ahead was still long, but for the first time in years, it felt like it belonged to me. In life, some losses seem like they'll break us, yet they open new doors, where we find real strength and the meaning of honesty. For me, the journey wasn't about winning or losing against anyone. It was about living truthfully, knowing I deserve a life not controlled by lies. What about you? If you were in my place, betrayed in public but holding the truth, would you stay silent or step forward to face it? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If this story resonates with you, follow the channel so you won't miss more stories about family, the trials we face, and how people find their way back after the storm. See you in the next stories, where each of us can find a piece of ourselves.